Jersey with First Lady Tammy Murphy. Welcome from sea to shining sea. I admit we are a little bit delinquent on making our blueberry wave fizz or our Pacific to Atlantic seafood dip, but we will get to that. Incredibly honored to be tonight with six, not five, not four, but six current or former women governors in the great Democratic Party. And we are incredibly humbled and honored. And they'll introduce themselves, but it's a discussion that'll be moderated, and Tammy will introduce her in a second, by our long time and dear friend, former governor, former secretary, Kathleen Sebelius. But we've got Governor Kate Brown on from Oregon, Governor Janet Mills from down east in Maine, Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Gretchen, fantastic job last night from the great state of Michigan. Governor Laura Kelly, one of Kathleen's successors in Kansas, and Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham from the great state of New Mexico. I'm honored to be the chair of the DGA, and I'm further honored that Michelle is vice chair and chair-elect. I want to give a shout out to the respective state parties that have come in together in this joint venture tonight. Obviously, New Jersey, we're proud of that, but Kansas, New Mexico, Michigan, Maine, Oregon, and Rhode Island. Keep Gina Raimondo and her family in your prayers. She wanted to be with us tonight, but could not due to some family challenges. So again, keep her in your prayers. I'm incredibly honored to call the folks on this call colleagues. It's an extraordinary, powerful group of leaders, and it's particularly poignant that we're gathering at the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. And you look at any measure, the amount of women as a percentage of population, or as a percentage of undergraduate degrees, graduate degrees, however way you want to slice it, and then you look at the percentage of elected officials, again, any way you want to slice that. And while we've made a lot of progress, we are far from declaring victory. So it's an opportune moment for us to reflect at this moment at the 100th anniversary. And again, there are more Democratic, the good news is there are more Democratic governors, women governors, female governors today than there have ever been, but we have a ways to go. We've got a huge election upon us. I think the convention is off to a fabulous start. Tonight's theme is Leadership Matters. And boy, that begins with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And could we have a better duo representing our party in the general election, and Kamala in particular, given that we're acknowledging the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. Look at her extraordinary personal life story. Look at her elected and accomplishments as a professional. We couldn't have a better vice presidential nominee to stand alongside the one and only Joe Biden. And by the way, it's up and down the ballot. There are 11 governor's races. We were just discussing offline an incredibly important Senate race in Arizona. We've got House races all over the place. In New Jersey, Amy Kennedy, a name of royalty in the Democratic Party, Stephanie Schmidt, a name you may not know, are two other examples of challengers who we think have a real shot of winning. So for all those reasons, it's an incredible honor to be gathered with you tonight. And I'm honored to turn it over to the First Lady of the great state of New Jersey, Tammy Murphy.
Thank you, Phil. Hello, everyone, and thank you to our incredible female governors for being part of this conversation. 2020 obviously marks the 100th year anniversary of women gaining the right to vote in this country. Over the last century, we have made tremendous progress on the path to equality, but we still have a ways to go. Despite representing over half of the US population, women are not adequately represented in any branch of government. The women on this panel serve as an inspiration for young girls across this nation that they too can run for office and have a career in public service. Needless to say, as Phil just mentioned, we are all very excited that Senator Kamala Harris has joined Vice President Joe Biden's ticket. In her home state of California, she has served as prosecutor, attorney general, and senator. Senator Harris is a proven leader who will be phenomenal as the first female vice president of the United States. In an election where the stakes could not be higher, I am really so proud to support this ticket. Now, it is really my honor to introduce a remarkable woman who is moderating today's panel. Kathleen Sebelius is the former governor of Kansas and served in the Obama administration from 2009 to 2014 as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Secretary Sebelius was instrumental in the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, Bravo, which has resulted in 20 million Americans gaining healthcare coverage. She is an incredible role model and example for any young woman who seeks to improve the lives of others through leadership, hard work, and compassion. On a personal note, Kathleen has been an ally, advocate, and a dear friend to each of Phil and me. So let there be no doubt that we hold her in the absolute highest regard. With that, please help me welcome Secretary Kathleen Sebelius.
Well, thank you, Tammy, and thank you, Phil, for your friendship, for your support. Thank you, Phil, for leading the DGA. I was honored to be the first woman chair of the DGA, so it's really my great pleasure to be with these terrific governors tonight. And one of the things we've learned in America is how important leadership is, and failing at the federal level, we've seen the amazing CEOs of these states step up in an incredible way. Anybody who knows me well knows I have to start with a little bit of challenge for those of you on this call tonight. So a little Kansas history. Kansas is the only state to have elected 3 Democratic women governors. Woohoo! We could vote in Kansas as women full suffrage by 1912, a full 8 years before that happened in the United States. And we have in Kansas not only a terrific governor who you'll meet in a minute, but we elected the first woman mayor in the United States. So the first woman who was actually a CEO of government came from here in Kansas. But I thought we would start by asking these terrific governors to introduce themselves, but I want to do it as a history lesson. We're going to do it in the order in which your state ratified the 19th Amendment, and that starts with the great state of Michigan. So Governor Whitmer, if you would like to introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. My name is Gretchen Whitmer, or as Donald Trump likes to call me, that woman from Michigan. It's inspired so many Etsy stores in my state. And so I think that this has been a good for small business in a weird way. You know, when I took my oath of office a year and a half ago, like Michelle and Janet and Laura, and Kate had already had a term under her belt, but we never could have imagined being in circumstances like these. And I tell you, I am most grateful in the worst times to have fellow governors to lean on, to talk to run ideas by. And so I'm really glad to be here with my colleagues, but also people that have become my friends. And I know Governor Sebelius, that you and Governor Granholm from my state have a very close relationship from your time serving. And I think that's what we're building here together. It's been a challenge, no question. I came up through the legislature in Michigan, never thought I'd run for office again. And then the Flint water crisis happened, and I decided I needed to get in and fix problems. And threw my hat in the race, and the rest is history. But I remember waking up the day after the last presidential election thinking, I got to get organized and I got to run, because we need to make the change here at the local level if it's not going to happen at the federal level with the Trump election. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you during convention week, my colleagues, my friends, and all of you who are tuning in. So thank you.
Thank you, Governor. And the next state to ratify was Kansas. We were only 6 days behind Michigan, but we were 6 days behind. So Governor Kelly.
Well, actually, former Governor Sebelius, you've done my introduction for me.
Sorry.
That's fine. I am delighted to actually be the third, and as I always say, that not only the third woman governor, but the third Irish Catholic woman governor of the state of Kansas. And I'm actually sitting here looking on the screen at the reason I'm here is because Kathleen Sebelius and I were next door neighbors for 20 years. And she was in the state house. She was my state representative and wanted to move out and run for insurance commissioner. She came and she asked me if I would run for her house seat. And I said no. My kids were young and my husband didn't have a very flexible job. So I didn't think I really could do that. So I put it aside. 10 years later, my state senator had been defeated by a Republican. And Kathleen came back and said, okay, how about this time? Will you run for state senate and take Ray Jackson out? And at that point, my youngest was 17. And you can say no to Kathleen Sebelius once, but you can't twice. I did run for Senate back in 2004. I won by a grand total of 100 votes, but I was in, and I served in the Senate for 14 years before it became a moral imperative to run for governor. For 8 years, we suffered under the Sam Brownback administration, where he used Kansas as an experiment that failed terribly. And we were faced with a situation where trying to succeed him was somewhat even worse in the form of Chris Kobach, who I think has become internationally known for his beliefs, his ideologies. And so I looked at the race and thought there really is nobody in Kansas on the Democrat side who could win both a primary and a general election. So while I never wanted to be governor, it was not on my bucket list, I really did feel it was a moral imperative to do it because Kansas, while not my native state, has been very, very good to me and to my family. And so I went ahead and ran, and here I am, I won. So delighted to be with all of you tonight. This really is an important thing. The women's suffrage has always been something I've cared about greatly. Women's equality is something I've cared about greatly all of my life. And so it's wonderful to be here with really talented, accomplished women to discuss what we can do to pave the way for women coming behind us.
That's great. Maine was the next state to ratify, and we'll hear from Governor Mills.
Thanks. I wasn't
Yeah.
around at that time, just to be clear. Some of my family were, both my grandmothers voted in Maine for the first time in 1920. And one of my grandmothers was the first woman to own a car north of Bangor, in between picking potatoes and farming. But yeah, I grew up in a Republican family in Maine, like most people did in the 50s and 60s. I left Maine, and during the 60s, I got active in the women's rights movement and the peace movement and whatnot. Came back to Maine to go to law school, and ultimately became an assistant attorney general, and then the first woman district attorney in New England, and one of the first in the nation, actually. So that was sort of groundbreaking. And I remember I used to get asked, well, what's it like to be a woman DA? And I'd go, well, I don't know. I've never been a male DA, so. And then later on, I practiced law in Western Maine with my brother, and was in the legislature, which is part-time, for 6 years. Ran for attorney general and won. I was attorney general off and on for 8 years, including 6 years under my infamous predecessor in the governor's office, Paul LePage, who made waves, made headlines by using pretty mean, nasty words and trying to decimate our healthcare system, prevent the ACA from taking effect, and all kinds of other things.
I remember him well.
Yeah, you would. But I became like Laura. I got elected at the same time and took the place of a person who was fairly tyrannical Republican, Tea Party Republican. So I had a great first year, like many of us, a good first year. Got to expand Medicaid, got to start talking about climate change and education and pharmaceutical drugs and the opioid epidemic, and do some good things, get on our way. Thank God we got our legs under us that first year, because this year obviously hit us like a ton of bricks, every one of us. But it's been a pleasure. I have a cabinet of 15 people, 8 of whom, soon to be 9 of whom, are women. And I rely on them and their wise counsel every day. So I'm thankful to be here in this job and thankful for the friendship of Gina, Kate, Michelle, Lauren, Laura, and Gretchen. And I just love you all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Governor. And I know Kate thought I ignored her, but actually Oregon was next in the list, and we'd love to hear from Governor Kate Brown.
Thank you, Secretary Sebelius. I cheered when you said states because women in Oregon, I should say white women in Oregon, have been voting for 108 years. Oregon was the 7th state in the country to grant women the suffrage. And we have been fighting every single step of the way to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to have their voice be heard and to be able to cast a ballot and participate in this very important right of democracy. And I got into public service because I wanted to be a voice for the voiceless. And I've been getting up every single day for the last 30 years to work on women's rights. Oregon currently has the most comprehensive reproductive health care policy in the nation, ensuring that every woman, regardless of where she lives, regardless of her income, regardless of her immigration status, has access to the full complement of reproductive health services. As the nation's first LGBTQ governor, I've worked extremely hard to ensure that every single one of our citizens, and in particular, members of the LGBTQ community, can thrive. And so I'm very proud of the work we've been doing here. But as a former Secretary of State, I'm also just so excited about the leadership role that Oregon has played in the elections arena, making sure that every person has an opportunity to have their voice be heard. Oregon was the first state in the country to vote by mail. And now we know that voting by mail or vote at home in your pajamas at your kitchen table is the safest way to vote during a global pandemic. It's also extremely cost effective, and it is also not hackable. So we have many states following our lead. And I was also able to sign as governor the nation's first automatic voter registration bill.
Wow.
17 states and DC have followed our lead again, but we now have 91% of Oregonians registered to vote, truly living the vision that your vote is your voice and that every single voice matters. And look forward to working with the rest of the country to bring you all up to speed on progressive policy. So glad to be here tonight. Love my sisters in arms. My fellow Democratic women governors. It is such an incredible honor to serve with these amazing leaders. Secretary Sebelius, thank you for your work. And it was great to see Governor Murphy and his wife, Tammy, here tonight.
Thank you, Kate. And finally, not last, and last, but certainly not least, is Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham from the great state of New Mexico.
Well, thank you, Secretary, and a shout out to all these incredible women. Now, one of the reasons, ladies, that New Mexico was towards the end is because we were one of the last states to become a state in 1912. So if we're going to do history, when people actually talk about, this is America, speak English. Well, Spanish is the official language in New Mexico, because New Mexico, while not officially a state, we were celebrating governance and independence a full 200 years before the Pilgrims arrived in the United States. So we're an old, glorious, incredible state that's rich in culture and history. We've got 23 sovereign nations, and we're a majority minority state. And my family has been in New Mexico for more than 400 years. My grandfather was the first Hispanic Supreme Court justice. I've got cousins who have been former Secretary of Interior, former Congressman Manuel Lujan. It's a rich history, and how lucky am I to get to join the ranks of incredible leaders that really are about making a difference in their states and in our country. And I, like most of your stories, I came at this without thinking about being elected. I found my way into being appointed as a cabinet official, and that typically survives a governor. I did that for 3 governors, 2 Democrats and a Republican. I ran the Department on Aging and then the Department of Health. Secretary, I learned healthcare by having to navigate it for every single New Mexican. And it served me very well for understanding where the gaps are, which even with the Affordable Care Act, frankly, still exist today, but it's because we've been thwarted every step by Republicans in Congress, certainly by the Trump White House, who has repeatedly said, we're gonna have a healthcare plan, which really means, America, you should be on your own. And he's demonstrated that better than anyone in the world in the lack of response to COVID. So I wanted to be an advocate, wanted to make a difference. I practiced law for about 10 minutes before I got into being a cabinet secretary. I've been a county commissioner, a member of Congress, and now I'm in the world's best job, governor of the great state of New Mexico. Thank you everyone for having me.
Well, thank you to these incredible governors, and I'm going to call you all by your first name, and hopefully you can call each other by your first name, or we're going to sound like a bad Marx Brothers movie by using just the titles, since all of you are governors. You know, we've talked a little bit about certainly this 100th anniversary of suffrage, which is important, and the incredible voting bloc represented by women in the Democratic Party. I'd love you to touch base a little bit, and everybody doesn't have to speak on every question, but you can, and then we'll kind of move it around. But maybe Governor Grisham, we'll start with you. Michelle, talk a little bit about what the constituencies are that you think are critical to the Democratic Party, to electing Democrats that you've seen in your own state, but what you'd like the National Party to do in terms of expanding and making sure we're reaching out in the right way in this very important election year.
Well, Kathleen, I really appreciate that question, particularly from a very diverse, multicultural state. You know, one thing, if you ask each of us independently what our cabinets look like, you're going to learn that they are a majority, and some of us a super majority women, and also very diverse in terms of racial and cultural identities and ethnicities, representation in the LGBTQ community. That is what an effective democracy should look like. It should represent every community, every one of our constituents. And as we all know, given the fact that there are only 6 women governors, 6 female Democratic governors, it doesn't. We are not represented or reflected in the way that we should be. Here's another example. Right here in New Mexico, we lead the country in per capita Hispanic women as small business owners. But then when you look at New Mexico and women business owners in general, they have less equity in their businesses, which means they are less likely to make it. Well, that is an outrageous discriminatory effort because they're left out of the kind of advocacy and leadership that we know will always make a difference. The Biden-Harris ticket is an exemplary step in the right direction to make sure that if we want to continue having leadership that looks like the communities we serve, which means we'll have relationships with the communities and constituents we serve, we need more women, not just at the table, but leading the discussion, sitting at the head of the table. And we need more women and more women that are diverse across this country. And I'm expecting a diverse cabinet. And I have no doubt, because Vice President Biden said he'd have a woman as vice president. He had a very diverse group that he vetted. I have no doubt he's going to meet us right where he needs to in terms of the cabinet and promoting leadership that reflects our constituents up and down the ticket in every single state in this election.
And when you have women in the cabinet, you have got people who care about little kids, like the darling one that walked behind you while you were talking, Michelle.
That would be my 5-year-old granddaughter who is not shy. She's ready to go. There's a book called Grace for President. Have you all seen that book? And the little girl could be, certainly looks like a little girl of color. And she looks an awful lot like that darling grandchild of mine. And she said, Grace looks just like me. And that is exactly what we want moving forward in this country.
Nice. So Gretchen, let me ask you a question. What, can you talk a little bit about if you had female mentors in politics, who they were, how they influenced you, how that made a difference in your activity and in your ultimate running for office?
Sure. So I'm very fortunate. I grew up in a household where both my parents were feminists and absolutely convinced I could do things I wasn't convinced I could do. And that was really fortunate. So when I decided to run for office, like many women, it was someone else who suggested it. It hadn't dawned on me to run. I cared about politics. I had been active in other people's campaigns. I had been on staff in the State House of Representatives, but I had never thought of myself as a candidate until a friend of mine, man, said, you know what, you should run. And I was 29 years old at the time. And I really thought maybe that was a crazy suggestion. And I talked to each of my parents individually, and they both were like, absolutely, you'd be fantastic. And so I'm fortunate in that I am from Lansing, Michigan, which is where Debbie Stabenow, our current U.S. Senator, is from. And so she and I got to know one another. She has always been a great touch point for me. Jennifer Granholm, who was the first governor here in Michigan, the first woman governor in Michigan, was the Attorney General before she was governor. And my mother was one of her top people in the Attorney General's office. And so it was, I'm fortunate to have been around all of these powerful kind of ceiling shatterers that from whom I had the opportunity to learn and ask questions of and to understand. My mom used to tell the story that, my mom was blonde. You wouldn't know we were related if I showed you a picture of her. But she and Governor Granholm went into a building one time, and the security guard, one of the detail members, came in and said, did the Attorney General come in? And he goes, are you talking about those two blondes that just walked through? And it was the Attorney General. And anyway, my mom died of brain cancer, and it was during my first campaign. And I was sitting in the waiting room while she was in surgery, and her boss, Jennifer Granholm, came in and sat with me. And I'll never forget it. And I think that it's the women can carry the empathy and the strength in a way that that a lot of men maybe struggle to. And certainly there's a lot of baggage that comes with being a woman. We need to be able to lean on one another and talk to one another. And early on in my campaign for governor, I remember there was a effort to recruit someone into the race. I'd already been in it for a year. And there were some, knowledgeable older statespeople in the party who said, we need to see if there's someone else, because we don't think she can win. We don't think Michigan's ready for another female governor, frankly. They were using Governor Granholm against me in a weird way. And I called Debbie Stabenow and I said, what do I do? And she said, you can't control them. You just keep working, grit your teeth and work harder than anyone else. They can't stop you from working, and you can't control what they're going to do. And it was really good advice. And I needed to hear it at that time. And I've dispensed that advice often to fellow females who are running for office. And I think Jennifer Granholm, Debbie Stabenow, my mother, and my dad would be the role models that really kind of help me navigate things. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing that for others who are thinking about running or who already are running, but are thinking about maybe a higher office, because I do think that just a little bit of encouragement can go a long way, especially in this environment where it's so difficult and hard and daunting.
That's great. So Laura, as we think about the election that's coming up and look toward the future, and I think all of us have to be thrilled that Kamala Harris is on this ticket and will be a great running mate and a great governing partner with Joe Biden. But what do you think are the key barriers and challenges that still exist, particularly for women, in either accessing the ballot or becoming candidates themselves? What are the unique things that women have to deal with and face that, frankly, our male colleagues and friends don't think about?
Well, aside from having to spend an inordinate amount of time on our hair and our makeup and our wardrobe, which they clearly don't do, I think I think women have always and will always be in a no-win situation. You know, we're either too aggressive or we're too reserved. We're never going to hit a sweet spot because there is no sweet spot in so many other people's eyes. And so I think the way we deal with that is we just ignore it and we just plow through like Michelle did that wall. You just go for it and let those kinds of criticisms and concerns just roll off your back. You don't hear them. You just charge forward. Gretchen said that about, just keep working. You can't control what they're going to do. So just keep working. I think, Kamala Harris has already heard all of it start, whether it's about her being too aggressive, too nasty, too dark, quite honestly. I mean, she's going to get it all. And I think she has already exercised the way you need to act to just plow forward and do what you can do. And that will win. We've seen that happen. I mean, when I ran for governor, Kathleen, I don't know if you remember the editorial in the Kansas City Star after my debut forum during the primary. And, I was not stellar. There's no way I can pretend that I was, but the write-up was that I was too weak.
That's right.
And that there's no way that I could stand up to these guys and win what would be a difficult race in a very red state. Clearly I ignored that. I am who I am, and I just plowed through and people, I think it was the sincerity and the not trying to be something that you're not that won over the people, because I think in the long run, that's one of the things they like about women is that they trust us and that we tend not to be in it for the power, the glory, but rather for the public service. And so I just say, it's gonna happen. There's nothing we can do about it. Just go forward and be yourself.
And that's why they call you governor. So Kate, there's a recent tweet by Stephen King, and he said, women in command have done a far better job of dealing with COVID-19 than men have. Less tiresome macho bullshit. And it is I'm quoting Stephen King, God knows. I would never use that language. And we've seen this play out in women-led countries as well. What do you think those female executives have dealt with COVID differently, and how do you think, and at your level of CEO, how have you brought people together to deal with it?
Well, thank you, Kathleen, for that question. I would say, first of all, that Democratic governors have kicked ass in terms of dealing with the COVID-19 crisis. That the majority of us have used science and data to make our decisions. And we have put the health and safety of our constituents at the forefront of that work. In terms of women, what I have to say is that I think women work collaboratively. We are willing to take in information and use that information to help us make decisions. We listen really effectively, as opposed to having one person provide me with data. I have a team of people. I have a medical advisory panel. I have a number of folks for the Oregon Health Authority. So it's the collaborative, collective effort. It's the willingness to listen, and it's the willingness to change course if things aren't going right. There's no playbook for this. There's no guidebook. We are literally making this up as we go along. And by any measure, these women governors in this Zoom room have done an extraordinary job, and I'm really proud to serve with them. In terms of the election side, I have to just pick up on one thing Laura said so eloquently. The data is really, really clear. We know that it's harder for women in this country to run for these executive posts. Kathleen, you know that yourself. And the data is really clear. We know that women have to be qualified, competent, and they have to be likable. Unfortunately, Donald Trump has proved that men have to be neither. So it is so important that we all work together to defeat him and put Vice President Biden and Senator Harris in the White House. Literally, the future of our country depends upon it.
Well said. So Janet, you recently said, I spent the better part of my career listening to loud men talk tough. Wait a minute, I don't want to lose your quote. Loud men talk tough to disguise their weaknesses. How are the expectations different for you all as women, chief executives, than your male colleagues?
Oh, thanks for the question.
Quoting you to you.
That comment was in response to Donald Trump's visit to Maine during one of the most hellish weeks any of us had ever had. It followed, I had an explosion in a paper mill in Maine. We had the pandemic, obviously it was the height of the pandemic. We had the Black Lives Matter protests and whatnot going on. And we had that horrible call with the president on the call telling us to take back our streets and dominate our streets. And I'm looking around saying, what the hell is he talking about? And Barr was on the call and I said, do you know something we don't know? Because I don't see any terrorists coming into Maine, but so we had an interesting phone call and I asked him not to come to Maine, which he then took as a double dare, I guess. And he came to Maine that Friday and had press conferences with my predecessor, Mr. LePage. And the president called me a dictator because I hadn't opened up the state. Well, we have now, and we had then, the best statistics when it comes to fighting the pandemic. The best positivity rates, the lowest deaths, the lowest R ratings and all that, R values. So we were doing pretty well, but he called me a dictator, kind of went above and beyond. Well, okay, so I said, well, I've heard this kind of talk before. It always came from some male bully, and he's just one of them. That was my take. I think we are dealing with things differently. We don't have to talk tough. We don't have to prove ourselves. We just got to get the job done. That's what all of us on this call do. And as was said before, we rely on the science, on facts, not on some egotistical thing we have to prove out there, but on saving lives. The proof is in the pudding, and we're all doing a really good job at that. And not being honest with the people, just telling it like it is. You can't sugarcoat this pandemic. There's nothing great about it, and it's not a hoax. But you got to deal with the people honestly and tell them if there's a danger over here or danger over there, or if you just can't open up all the churches or the cinemas or the golf courses or the casinos because it will spread. You got to tell them the facts, and here's why. Look, nobody runs for governor. None of us ran for governor saying, one day I'll shut down my state. One day I'll declare a state of emergency. Wouldn't that be interesting? No, but here we are, and we've all done this, and we've all taken the right steps at the right times in our states to help save people's lives. We've done it methodically, scientifically, honestly.
And you've done it extremely well, I might say. I want to go back around the group one more time in the time that we have left, and I'm going to ask you all to respond to the same question, but we'll go in reverse order this time, starting with Michelle. So when the election on November 3rd goes as we all hope it will, when Joe Biden is elected the next president and Kamala Harris is elected the next vice president, what do you as governor need as the first thing from Congress that you hope they'll get their arms around? What are you looking for out of this new administration? And let's start with Governor Grisham.
Thank you, Kathleen. Look, this pandemic will not be over on November 3rd. There has not been a national strategy. I'm going to need the Biden White House to work with Congress, and I expect and believe that we'll have a Democratic majority in the Senate. That means making states whole, giving them the flexibility, and being very clear that this nation is going to take this pandemic and every other future public health emergency seriously. When that occurs, it is a signal to me that then I can do the transformative rebuilding of the economy, which every state can do if we're not fighting this pandemic independent and frankly, often against the federal government. In what world would any one of us have to try to interfere at an airport with our supplies because we know that FEMA will commandeer those supplies? And while I don't want any other state to suffer, but in a situation where things are literally being stolen out from underneath you, when your state expects you to protect your healthcare workers and your first responders and your residents in nursing homes, it's an outrage. I need a federal government that I can trust. So that's what I'm expecting. Take this on, have a federal response and strategy, get us through the tail end, get us ready to rebuild America and his Build Back Better. I believe it, I'm going to do it, and we can transform this country like never before.
That's great. Kate, I'd like to broaden the question a little bit. Let's assume that you each agree with the previous speaker.
Yes.
And so let's go to another issue that for Oregon is really that you rely on the federal government that you haven't had in the last 3.5 years, and you're hoping and waiting for a new president and vice president and a new Congress to deliver.
Great question. So Kathleen, I ran for the State House the very first time many years ago. I'll just say this, and I literally won that first race. It was a Democratic primary for the House. I won that race by 7 votes. And I will tell you this 30 years later, I still have Oregonians say to me, they now call me Governor, Governor Brown, I was your 7th vote. I was the reason that you won. When the very fabric of our society is frayed, it is so incredibly important that we strengthen the foundation of our democracy. So we need an accessible voting system in this country. And we need a voter registration system that allows every eligible American to participate. I know with the Biden-Harris team in charge and living in the White House, that we can deliver on the promise of America, that by working together, we can build a better America for everyone.
That's great. Janet, we'll go to you.
Thanks. You know, we made great progress under President Obama on healthcare, and we've got to go back to that and rebuild the healthcare system across America with the help of people like yourself, Mr. Secretary Sebelius, and Jean Lambrou in my cabinet, and
By the way,
other good women who know something about this subject. You know, revamping the healthcare system across the country is a major need, desperate need of all the states, particularly Maine, where we fell behind for 8 years under Paul LePage, and trying to rebuild the system, make it equitable, and make sure people don't fall by the wayside, just trying to get basic health care, preventative care, and whatnot. So that'd be a #1 priority for my state.
that's great. So Laura, again, you all may have an opportunity that I never had. The 2-term governor always served with a Republican president. So as a Democratic president comes into office in January of 2021, what are you looking for to make your life easier and make the lives of Kansans like me easier?
Well, I hope that on his coattails, he brings me a lot of Democratic legislators because I'll still be here, still doing the hard work, and I need some help. So I'm hoping that Joe and Kamala really provide me some support and some new friends here. if we don't have the stimulus bill, the stimulus 4, that provides some backfill for lost revenues, both on the state and local level, I would hope that the Biden administration would work with Congress and get that done, because I know I'm speaking for every other state too. That is absolutely imperative. We have a lot of rebuilding to do. A lot of us, I think, have done a great job, managing our economies and our budgets through this time. But it's going to hit, and it's going to hit hard. And when it does, we're going to need the federal government to come in and provide some support. So that we can do the kind of infrastructure building, rebuilding of our states, particularly in Kansas. And my guess again, that this will be in a number of other states. This pandemic has really demonstrated the antiquity and the inadequacy of our information technology systems across the board. But most clearly in our labor department, trying to deal with unemployment and other kinds of programs like that. Those are very expensive systems and ones that we're going to need some help from the feds in order to be able to put that in place, so that just regular operations, but should something like this ever happen again, we'll be able to address the needs of Kansans, because it's been tough. It's been really tough to get people what they need in a quick manner. And then I think lastly, what I really, really need and want is a civil, calm voice that works to bring people together. The divisiveness that has occurred on the federal level, particularly with the Trump administration, has really rippled down into our states and created divisions here that just don't need to be. It is forced families to be torn apart. Obviously, and it's emboldened people to there's no longer any underlying racism. It's out there. It's just flat out being demonstrated. And I think that's because of the message that's been sent from the federal level. So what we really need is a Joe Biden, a Kamala Harris, to speak to the country, speak to the people, and reassure them that we're all in this together, and that we all need to work together. And we all need to be good to one another.
Well said. Gretchen, from the great state of Michigan, we're assuming that all the other wish lists have been filled, and what's missing from this package? We can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I expect, so I agree with everything that my colleagues said. Ditto, 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 ditto. I expect Joe Biden to fill a cabinet with experts. And, I'm not that I've missed her, but he'll hopefully be sending Betsy DeVos home and putting an education expert in the Department of Education and leading on a real education agenda for this country, and getting an infrastructure package done, because I need a partner to help me fix these damn roads.
This is great. And I think that you've taken some time out of busy schedules. I know a number of you will be on the main podium as Governor Whitmer was, and I think we're going to see Governor Grisham there later in the week. All of you are doing incredible jobs as CEOs of your states. It is an enormously important role to play, particularly when there's a total vacuum at the federal level. You are doing double duty, because you're filling in not only the role of a great chief executive at the state level, but you're trying to fill in all the gaps that should be delivered with a partnership at the federal level. So I'll leave you all with a thank you, but one final challenge, just as our way of celebrating 100 years of suffrage in Kansas. I just want to tell you that we have an entirely female federal ticket going into the fall. We will be a lot better off if 100% of them win, but one way or the other, it's a great look of Kansas in 2020, where every person running for the House and our one candidate for the United States Senate are all women following Governor Kelly's lead. So thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for participating in this. Good luck. God bless. Stay safe. And on to November.
On to November.
Thank you. Don't forget to get your ballot in early. Thank you.
Early.
Early.
Vote early. You bet. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you, Kathleen.